Good evening. I'd like to welcome you, but first of all, I want to thank you. I know that there have been a lot of school meetings over the last several months, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come out for this evening. My name is Tom Andrews. I'm the interim superintendent. Hopefully you soon be rid of me so that... So an interim superintendent is a harder thing to say anyway, so... But hey, it's my pleasure to be here and to talk with you this evening. I'm only going to be here for, talk a little bit, and then it's turning over to others. But what I want to do is go over and recap a little bit, because when you came tonight, you may have expected that you'd be listening to two different candidates that would be coming. What we have done is we've gone through the process, and the process was pretty good in terms of vetting and finding people who were excellent leaders. And in that process, when you're doing that, what happens is that we're not the only school district that goes out and says, we want a good leader. What happens is that others need them as well. And so what we do is we go through the list that we get, we narrow it down, and then we bring in what we think are the best of the crop, and then for the interviews. We initially had 5 people identified for interviews. In trying to set up the interviews, one of them said, I have discussed with my family, I'm going to stay as a superintendent in the district I am. The other person says, I have an offer in hand, so I don't want to disrupt that. And you probably read about it, it's one of the neighboring districts, ended up with that superintendent. We brought in 3 people to interview, and that was then narrowed down to 2 from the feedback that was given and the interviews. That was narrowed down to 2, and so we announced the 2, and wouldn't you believe it, that one of the 2 got offered a superintendency. So our committee really did a good job, our committees, in terms of vetting and finding out who are quality leaders, and so that's how it happened. Well, tonight you have a form that's with you. If you need a pen or something, we have it here. If you don't have a form that's there, we have those available too. What we're asking you to do is to listen. People will have questions. I'm going to start out by introducing them, and then I'll ask the first question after he's introduced. And from then on, it's yours. You can ask questions. We'll go 30 minutes of questions, and then we'll give them time to recap at the end. And it's interesting when we go through this process, because you try to ask questions that are going to show you what the person's going to be like. And you know as well as I do is that when the rubber meets the road, when things start happening, that's when you really find out. And so what we try to do is put them through as many things as we can before that to see what that means. And at the end, we'll give, at 7 o'clock, we'll give you 15 minutes to write up your responses. And then what will happen is the candidate will go into another hour-long interview with the school board. And that school board, because there's one candidate, it'll be an up or down decision and vote. And then what is the next step? And so that's what they will pursue at the conclusion of the open forum, is they'll go into that meeting and do the interview. I will introduce Jeff in just a minute, and then we'll start. I will ask that we have all this discourse in a very respectful manner, because we really want to sell our district to whoever is here as well. So to start out with, I'm going to introduce to you Jeff Nelson. Jeff Nelson is presently a principal. He had his Master's of Science in Administrative Leadership and Supervision from University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. He has now finished his coursework and is in line to get his doctoral in Leadership for the Advancement of Learning and Service. And he finished that coursework this spring. And so at this time, it is my pleasure to introduce you a fine gentleman, Jeff Nelson.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. It's been a long day. I started here at noon. I was able to meet all district office staff individually for about 15-20 minutes, and then I was able to take a tour of the 3 elementary schools and meet all 3 elementary principals. I wasn't able to go to the middle school because they're at the SAIL conference, and then Tom also brought me down into the high school. And even though I've been the high school principal at Cedarburg for the last 7 years, I have only been in the gym or the soccer field or the football field. So I've never been in the auditorium. I've never been in the main office, and so it was an interesting experience even just walking through that. So a little about myself. I grew up in Sumner, Washington, so you won't see this on my resume or in the paper or anywhere else, but I grew up in Sumner, Washington, which is about 45 minutes south of Seattle. And I have 2 older brothers, one that's 10 years older and one that's 12 years older than I am. I grew up in a blue-collar family. My dad was a maintenance mechanic. My mom was a stay-at-home mom and a secretary after I got into school. And I am the first in our family to go to college and graduate from college, and so education was instilled in me as a area to look towards, and I'm proud to have gotten to this point where I am. And the PhD was probably that lifelong dream of moving on to that in that sense. So I need to write my dissertation. So minor detail, but I have a lot of credits out of the way. And they have a name for it, which is sort of scary. It's called ABD, which sounds like all but dead, and it's not that. It's all but dissertation. So I still have 2 older brothers that still live out there, and I have a wife and 2 kids. So this is my wife Ginger, who's sitting in the front row, and our son Jack, who's 7, and he wants me to say that he likes to play soccer, and my daughter Lindy, who is 9. And so we moved to Cedarburg 7 years ago. We live in the town of Cedarburg. We're off of Lakefield Road, about half a mile from Green Bay Road. So if you know where the Quilting Barn is or Ernie's Wine Bar, those are the 2 areas. Those are usually 2 attractions that people know where one of those are. And so I think it's like 7 minutes for me to get here today at noon. As Tom said, I went to UWM. And I ended up teaching for my master's, but I started off my teaching career at Heritage Christian Schools, a private school in Milwaukee. I started out teaching Phi Ed. And as a first-generation student going to college, why did I choose Phi Ed? Because my coach had a big influence on my life when I was in high school, and I was like, why wouldn't I love athletics? So I went into Phi Ed, and I ended up coaching basketball, coaching soccer, played soccer throughout my life, and so it was not great guidance. I just happened to go into that area and really enjoyed that. Became a part-time middle school principal with only a couple hundred kids in 6th through 8. I part-time taught, part-time was a middle school principal, and then my last 4 years there, I was high school principal after I'd received my master's. So in 2000, I got my master's. I went from there to Franklin High School. So I went from like 300 kids in a private high school to 1,200 kids in a suburban district, and I was there for 3 years, had a great experience there, bless you, and then went from there to West Dallas Central, where and became head principal there, which has about 1,450 kids, to high school town. So their high school is 3,000 students, so you think of Grafton School District of being 2,000, just the 2 high schools. So it was a huge experience, huge community, and a really good learning experience for me. And then the last 7 I've been at Cedarburg, and each one of those experiences I think has prepared me to move forward and look at a superintendent role. You think of probably the 2 most visible people in our district will tend to be your superintendent and your high school principal. And so if I walk into a store, whether you're a high school student or not, if you have elementary kids, you know who the high school principal is because you're looking ahead to that, or you've seen the homecoming parade, or you've been to a football game, or to a musical, or to whatever it may be. And so interacting with people, selling your district, those are things that are essential characteristics of a superintendent, and something that I've enjoyed doing, and being involved in a variety of activities, and being visible in the community in that sense. Some of the things that I talk about is like core values. One would be that I believe all kids can learn. I don't think all kids learn at the same pace or at the same time. So although I agree with No Child Left Behind, having 2 kids of my own, I don't want my kids left behind. But to say they're all going to reach a certain standard at a certain time and point is not feasible. Not all kids don't all learn at the same time, but all kids can learn. And I think that high expectations can be set for all kids, and success looks different for all kids. And I think that's the key that's important when you're working with students, is that it's one of the best things about being an educator is that every day is different, because you're dealing with young adults, you're dealing with young children, you're dealing with middle school students, you're dealing with young children, and it's just such a growth process that you get to see. As I've worked over the last 7 years as high school principal, I've had an opportunity to have a number of the teachers and administrators that I've worked with to go on and become principals. And so also that opportunity to mentor other adults. Even this past year, a colleague that used to work with me works in the Waukesha district, and they had a new principal that was going to be taking over next year, and he came and shadowed for a day because they thought the things we were doing were very good. So even the opportunity to mentor, that's something I look forward to doing as a superintendent, is mentoring other people and helping them reach their goals and dreams, and help them be able to help students then in that sense. So, you know, I tend to be someone that looks at hiring the best people possible. I think that the way you improve student achievement is you hire the best teachers and you empower them to do their jobs. And today, as I walked around and talked to administrators, talked to principals, and as I talked to either friends of mine who live in Grafton and send their kids here, or who have friends that do that, the teaching staff is one of the strengths that I hear about this district across the board. And so I look forward to trying to continue that and to maybe bring new ideas to help with that. So those are some of the things you probably wouldn't know about me, and unless you really knew me, but that gives. I like to play golf, so that's if you know anyone that knows me, you would know that is something that in the summertime is a really good thing to do in that sense. But I know Tom has a question for me, and then hopefully you'll have some questions. And I guess we've been asked to use the mic because we are being broadcast and it goes through the recording up there. So please do use the mic for questions.
And this mic is live, so I'd like to start with the questions. And again, thank you, Jeff. Would you be able to describe your leadership style to the rest of us?
Sure. So I employ a collaborative style when I work with people. I think it's important that when you're looking at decisions, when you're looking at initiatives, when you're working with people, that you involve all kinds of stakeholders. So I had the pleasure of going out to dinner with two board members and Diana tonight, and as we were discussing various initiatives we've had at the high school, when I look at initiatives, whether it was, we brought collaborative time, so some would call that professional learning communities. This past year we did a schedule change at the high school, and on all those committees there's always going to be teachers, there's always going to be parents, and there's always going to be students, because at the high school level it'd be harder as you get to an elementary level, but middle school, I think that's a very appropriate. It's affecting them, and you need to hear all those voices. And when you involve all stakeholders in a collaborative environment, then you allow people to share their opinions. You allow them to be a person for other people to go to. So if I'm a parent and I don't feel comfortable coming to the principal or the superintendent or the director of instruction or whoever it may be, but I do know so-and-so who's on the committee, then I can go talk to that person and make sure my voice is being heard. And when you do that, then you're transparent. And my leadership style is one that is, I present data, we present reasons for rationale for it. I think people that know me would say that I'm honest, that I'm a good listener. You may not agree with the decision that we make, so just because I listen, that doesn't mean that decision is going to go in a certain direction, because as a team we've decided to go in one direction, in a different direction perhaps, but definitely it's something that is a group decision. And so there are times when a group decision isn't appropriate, and then my style is to be honest on the front end. So when we did our schedule change, it was obvious, I made it clear, everyone had an equal voice. So we were looking for consensus. And consensus doesn't mean everyone is 100% for it, but it means that everyone can live with it. So am I for it, or can I live with it? Because it's hard to get everyone to agree to something, but if you can't live with it, why can't you live with it? And so we strategically picked the president and vice president of the freshman and sophomore class. We had the PTO president and vice president, and we had our fine arts boosters president and vice president, and then we had like 6 teachers on the committee. And those teachers were involved, and parents and students were involved in after-school meetings, all those things that sort of went into it. The presentations that we made, if we presented to the faculty, they were there. If we presented to the school board, they were there. We had listening sessions with parents so everyone could come. We did not stream it, but we did use a Google Doc that was available. So if people asked a question, we recorded it in a Google Doc, and then we posted that. So even if you hadn't seen it yourself or weren't able to be there, you could then go back and see what the answer was to those questions, or ask a question even though you weren't there. So my leadership style is one that that is trying to be a consensus builder, but also keeps the needs of kids first. And I think that's the most important thing. We work in a people industry, and our clients are students. And so we need to make sure that we are keeping their interests at heart as we look forward to various initiatives and so forth.
And now we open it up to people who have questions. So if you have a question, raise your hand and I'll get you the mic. Oh, it's giving me a challenge right away.
What role would you expect the various administrators in a school district to play if you had a teacher who was underperforming and you realized this in the middle of the school year? What role would the various administrators in a school district play to handle a situation where a teacher was underperforming in the middle of a school year?
Yep. So one of the things that probably, as you heard in my first answer, is also that I'm big into process. I think there should be a process in place for teachers, for administrators, for students, for anyone that we work with when expectations aren't being met. I think that no one gets into education to not do a good job of it. And so no matter how they're doing, people should be treated like human beings. They should be treated with respect. There should be a process in place so that if someone isn't performing to expectations, that we're able to put a plan in place to help that person. And if that person, once we go through that process and we try and help them and they still aren't able to meet our expectations, then we've done this, we've documented, we've given opportunities, we've evaluated multiple times. So whenever someone goes on a plan of improvement, the goal is, we think of that as a negative, but really that should be positive. We all should be on a plan of improvement. But there's a negative connotation to it, because we all should be improving. I want to get better every year. So I work hard to get better every year. And so when someone isn't meeting our expectations, then we should have an honest conversation with data and reliable data to say, this is where you need to improve. And we're going to help you get better. I'm going to come in more often, and I'm going to keep giving you feedback. And if you aren't getting better, then the discussion is this really the place for you? Because we're getting to a point that I'm going to have to non-renew you, and that's going to become very difficult for you to get a job next. So you might want to think of, is this really a good place for us, a good place for you? And so administrators, you would start with the building administrator. The building administrator would be the lead on that, of handling those situations, and then we would have processes in place of who they would go to next. As a superintendent, I would always be involved in those discussions. I would always make sure that our processes are being followed and that we're being fair. But if we expect teachers to if we expect them to be hitting an expectation and they're not hitting it, then they need to work harder to get to that point. And if they're not able to, then we need to have an exit plan for them, either them voluntarily doing it or us having to move them on. I remember my first year in Cedarburg, we had a teacher that was in a similar situation, and I have a binder that's like this big because she had to turn in lesson plans every week, which meant I had to read every lesson plan and give her feedback, give this person feedback. Like and yet we ended in a good spot because you treated her fairly. The person's a good person and may not be meeting expectations, and that's what you want to do is handle people in that way. Gee, I was hoping we were done. I was like, I shouldn't have been so nervous. I'm kidding.
My name is Jessica Wolf. I'm the Planning and Development Director for the Village of Grafton. I was wondering what your opinion is on how the school district and how school district staff should be involved in their community, particularly as it relates to long-term planning, economic development, community events, recreation, those kind of things.
Yeah, great question. So and as a high school principal, I've presented every year at Rotary, at the Cedarburg Grafton Rotary, about the return on investment that people are getting in Cedarburg based on our high school. And so I think that needs to be a partnership that is in place where you're having discussions, because a district brings value to the community. It brings value to home prices. The better a school does, the higher your achievement scores are, the more accolades they receive for various things, may not even be related to standardized tests. The more uniqueness you have in that sense, the better it's going to help the village, it's going to help the town, it's going to help any chamber of commerce, all those pieces, because it's seen as a viable place that people want to move to. And in a place like Grafton, where we're competing with other districts in the area, and some may have higher test scores, some may have passed a referendum, all those pieces, there's a lot of different reasons why people move into communities. And so to be able to work and make sure our long-range planning is in line and a discussion, I think is very valuable. And you think of like being involved in the community, I think, I go back to that first thing where we're talking about principal and superintendent being very visible in the community. I think being visible at various events representing the district, making sure if there's questions that need to be brought back to the school board, that there's an easy avenue for that to occur, and that relationships are being built with people that are leaders in the community, so that there is open communication. And the only way you get to build trust is you have to talk to people. No one reads an email and believes what you say, because there's no tone in email. Like, you have to, there's just something about seeing someone, and that's probably why some of you are here. I just want to see this person, and who is he? I don't even have a question. I just want to see and hear and see if he's lying to me. But like that's really the piece that you're looking for. And so like you need to be a visible presence in the community, and then facilitate whatever would occur in that sense.
Hi, I am wondering what your plan is to retain exceptional staff in our district, where we've had some people leave due to the turmoil, and I'm wondering what your plan is to do for the staff that has stayed. And they're the ones that are with our kids. Like you said, if students are truly first, I see them as the integral part for my kids who are dealing with them. You know, they have the best experience with our kids. So what is your plan for staff?
Yeah, so I think there's a quote, and I'm not going to say it correctly, but it's something about people leave because of a lack of leadership. And so when you don't feel appreciated, then that makes it easier to look at other things. Act 10 is, obviously, if you read the news today, there's a big study that came out 5 years after Act 10, and they're talking about the compensation for teachers and so forth. And actually, my dissertation is on the effect of Act 10 and teacher retention. So it aligns perfectly with what you're saying. So what was it 5 years before Act 10 occurred? What is it 5 years after Act 10? And the idea is to create a dashboard of that would help districts be able to see where that fits in that puzzle. So Act 10 really, people can have different versions of why Act 10 is a good thing or why it's a bad thing. But one thing Act 10 for sure did is it made teachers free agents, and it made the best teachers free agents. And so the idea of Act 10 should be that we're going to develop a compensation system that attracts and retains our top teachers. Because that's really what you're asking, is like, how are you going to do it? And Act 10 gives you some flexibility, but if you use Act 10 as a sledgehammer, because I will, then you're going to lose your best teachers, because they're not treated with respect then. And so, I've always found that when people are appreciated, they'll do more than what's expected. And it's sort of hard to put that into words, but when people are appreciated, they'll do more than what's expected. And you know that in your own job. When someone says, nice job, or I appreciate you doing that extra work, you actually do more the next time. When they don't say anything or they make a negative comment, it's such a demotivator that you have to really internally focus to even get back to that level. And so the goal would be to make sure, what is our compensation system now? I know as I found out today as I'm touring and talking to the various administrators, that there's something new in place and trying to make sense of that. So it'll take more work on my part catching up on that. But that would be the goal, is to make sure that our compensation system, but then also the culture in our district is one of, like, teachers are treated with respect, they're listened to, and they're part of the process. And I think that will also go a long way. Obviously, you need to pay your bills, but you also need to be treated with respect and acted like you're a professional, and there's a culture of excellence, and you're part of that culture of excellence, and it isn't top down. It truly is a shared culture.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask if the cards fall in line and you become our superintendent, what will your priorities be? As you know, we've had a tumultuous half a year, and there are some things that are laying right out there in the open that need to be addressed, and I'd like to know how you would prioritize those things that need to be addressed immediately. Thank you.
So working with the school board would sort of set some priorities for me as to what they're wanting the focus to be at the beginning. So there's a lot of things to occur, but the overarching theme that I keep hearing from everyone is bridges need to be built. And that can happen in a variety of ways. And so, you know, who do you meet with first? Who do you talk to first? I'll use a golf analogy. It doesn't matter. You don't win a golf tournament on Thursday. You only lose the golf tournament on Thursday. It's 4 days of golf. And this would be true in this sense as well. It's not so much what we do right away. It's, are we sustaining that? And are we really building bridges? And it isn't just a quick fix, or it's just a fake thing that people are just like, well, that's not even, now it can't be true. So, I guess I would work with the board to say, what are those priorities? Obviously, it's going to be a lot of listening, because there is, I mean, if you read, if half of what I read in the news graphic is true, which is probably about right, there are obviously some issues that need to be resolved here. And so, I talked in my interview process about the need to, I want to meet with individual board members. I want to meet with individual administrators. I want to set up processes so that, on a semi-annual basis, I'm meeting with the PTO or the PTA, or you have different acronyms for every one of them. I know, I can't remember the third one. Sorry. Yeah, there we go. FSO. Yeah, I was like, wow. And so I'm just looking on the website. So, but to meet with the leaders of that, just so that there's a parent voice as well. So, and what I've done in the past is to, instead of just saying I'm going to randomly select people, and then it looks like, well, I'm just picking my friends, and they really aren't really helping at all. It's to look at the leadership of those groups and to meet with them to talk about initiatives, talk about ideas, to hear from them, and to be able to share with the board, here's some concerns, or here's some things that are going really well. I think also it is a. I said this at dinner, I think you should brag more. Like, I think there's really good things going on here. Like I think it's you're selectively comparing yourself to certain districts that isn't who you are and isn't where you are, but there's a lot of really good things going on here. And it doesn't have to be in one program or in one area. There's just a lot of great things. But if I go on your website, like, I got to dig pretty hard to find great things. And so, but it's very easy to find bad things because everyone will publish that. So I think it's being aware that we need to be publicizing the great things that are occurring here in our district, in your district, and talking through those things, but then setting processes up in place to make sure that we have processes for this communication, for building these bridges. It's talking to the board members, who are the players in the community, who are the proponents of the referendum, who are the opponents of the referendum, and being able to sit down and have a conversation and be able to listen and hear. As an outsider coming in, it's a perfect opportunity. And I remember, when I first came in as a high school principal, everyone wanted a minute of my time because they all had an idea of what would make it better. And that's a great opportunity, though, to hear and develop relationships in that way. So that's how I'd start and develop those priorities with things in place, because you're also going to need to have, one of the things I talked about too is once a semester being in every school for the day, and just saying I'm having office hours in that school, asking for, whether it's the faculty lounge or the lunchroom or whatever you call it, and just being open, and people can come in, and if they don't come in, then they want to do an individual meeting, they can. If they want to wait until their lunch hour and then come in as a group, but just be able to get to know people, be able to walk around the school building. If I walk into a classroom now, like, teachers keep teaching, they'll usually say hi, and then they'll keep teaching, and kids say hey, and then they go back to doing what they're doing, and I go over and talk to them. Like, it shouldn't be, I walk into a building and like, oh my gosh, someone's in trouble. Like, that shouldn't be how it is. That this district can't be in that spot. There can't be that many bad things happening here. But but people aren't gonna believe that until they see me in the building multiple times with nothing bad happening. So those would be the things that I would be developing, those processes to have that in place.
I feel pressure to ask. So my name is Kate Nessler. I was in your interview actually last Wednesday, and I'm just going to repeat a question that I thought was good.
Did I have a good answer?
I think so.
Okay, good.
It was 3 hours for all of us, so.
Could have been someone else who
Could have
answered it
been.
correctly. Nice, great.
What do you think the relationship is between facilities and student learning? Do you remember that one?
I do remember
Okay,
that one,
good.
actually. That's a good question. And there was actually you had to write something. That was actually one of the writing prompts they gave you as well. Yes, there is a relationship. I mean, you start talking about student safety first, and in today's society, unfortunately, that becomes the first thing you need to start with when you talk about facilities. And are my kids in a safe environment? Am I, as a teacher, in a safe environment? As I an administrator, as a custodian, as a secretary, is it a safe environment for me in that sense? And then you broaden that. So when I'm walking around and I'm told that, well, here we have 2 rooms here, and we can't have kids go in there because they could get sick in there, but staff can go in there. It's probably not the best thing because there's a lot of data that say, like, when staff are gone and they have sick days and you have a sub in, no matter how the quality of the sub, the students' instructional gains are going to be less. And so, so air quality is a big deal, and there's different things you can do with maintenance and so forth, and different UV lights and so forth, and being able to do that and have a cost at the beginning, but that may, if a student gets sick or has a whatever it may be, or a teacher gets sick, to be able to use that to sanitize that room and more that way. And I think you want kids to feel proud of going to their school. And there should be a sense of pride. And when I talk to the teachers, the administrators and the district office staff I talk to, like, there's a pride. And, unfortunately, the majority of them haven't been here very long. There's only a couple people that have been here, longer than 5 years. And so when you talk but the people everyone that's here is excited to be here. So there's obviously a pride in being here as an administrator, as a leader, in that sense. All the secretaries I talk to are very friendly and polite, and I hear only good things about that. So, like, you want kids to feel that same way. And you don't need the Taj Mahal to do that. But you do need a safe facility that students can take pride in, and that allows learning to occur. And if we pride ourselves on various programs, then you have to have space for those various programs. So if you pride yourself on having a great fine arts department and you don't have an auditorium, then it makes it very hard to say we really pride ourselves on having a fine arts department, because our play is now on the stage at the high school, like in the gym. Like that doesn't make sense. So I think all those things come together, though, to sort of build a culture of excellence. And I think it's the little things that matter a lot. One of the things we talk about with all new teachers when we come in is, like, we say that we're all custodians here. So if you're walking down the hallway and there's a piece of paper on the ground, my expectation is you pick that up. And if I'm walking down the hallway, you can expect that I've already picked it up. And when I pick it up as a principal and there's a kid next to me, I've seen this, they'll see something else and they'll go over to the other side and they'll pick something up. Like, it's contagious. And if I see a teacher do something, then I'm like, oh, I better be looking for something too. Like, I mean, it becomes contagious, but you model what you expect in that sense, and that builds that whole climate of excellence, culture of excellence that I talk about. Hopefully that was similar to my last answer for last time.
Way over here.
I'm Cindy Schacht. We met last week as well. I was in on the interview
I
process.
recognize you.
But my question for you is, look at this auditorium. What would you do about filling it for a meeting like this?
Oh. Well, it's sort of a double-edged sword, to be honest with you, because like, as a high school principal, twice a year I did a principal coffee, and so I worked with 2 ladies in our PTO, and we would pick out topics. So we'd usually pick out 3 topics, and for 30 minutes I'd talk about those 3 topics. So they, as a PTO, they were saying, parents want to hear about this, Jeff. And okay, so I'd talk about that. And then there'd be 30 minutes of open, they can ask whatever they want. As long as they didn't mention a particular teacher, they could ask any question they wanted. So on the one hand, you always wanted people to be there, but on the other hand, you didn't really want the audience full. Because if they're full, there's probably a problem. So like I guess, I don't know if you ever want a full audience for an issue. Because I think if you get to that point, you've already lost. You need to have processes in place so that when you're talking about initiatives, when you're talking about decisions, that there's processes that have sounding boards in place before you get to this point. So, for example, as a principal, I meet every month with the PTO president and co-president before my meeting. So I spend an hour and a half every month with them to talk about, what are you hearing as rumors? Are there hot buttons out there? I don't want to walk into a PTO meeting and have some parent ask me a question that I have no idea where that came from, and I'm not prepared. Like, so there should be processes in place so that you don't get to a point where it's a full room wondering why have we not done something. So before I got to Cedarburg, they tried changing the master schedule, and they had meetings in the auditorium. And the auditorium, I guess, I wasn't there, thankfully, but it was packed, and people walked in with signs saying, you know, liar, and you're trying to kill the fine arts. You don't ever want a meeting like that as a leader. Nothing good comes out of that. We had listening sessions in our LGI, which is about, it probably seats a little bit more than this, seats like 100 people. And we'd have like 20 people there. So we'd communicated enough in advance, and we'd vetted our information before we did it, so that we didn't end up with a room full of people wondering, well, why don't I know the facts? Like, I work hard at communicating with people, and there aren't many things I do well, but I think that's one of them. And there's so many mediums to use now to get instantaneous feedback out to people, and you need to figure out, you need to use all mediums because not everyone likes one. And when you share information and are proactive with it, that builds that trust so that you don't end up with a room full of, I would never want, unless you're coming to celebrate something that we've done, then I want, and then I would talk about it in multiple different ways. It'd be on the sign, it'd be on Twitter, it'd be on Facebook, you'd get an email, you'd get a phone call, like all those pieces we'd utilize to get you to be aware of it.
I know you have a lot of middle and high school experience, and just wondering how you would meet the needs of the elementary schools. Like, what skill set you would bring, how would you best communicate and strengthen them, because that really lays the groundwork for the future grades.
Yep. So I think, you know, you're lucky, you're fortunate to have a good C&I director currently who looks at K-12 curriculum. And as a superintendent, my job is to work with her to make sure our curriculum is being implemented across the district in a viable way. There's a common experience for kids. If kids are in first grade, no matter who their teacher is, they should be getting a common experience. If kids are in biology, no matter who their teacher is, they should be getting a common experience. I know nothing about calculus or chemistry or content related to that, but I do know some good questions, and I know what good teaching looks like, and I know how to work with people and empower them to do their jobs. So as a superintendent, my job is not to help with curriculum and implement curriculum, because that's not my expertise. It's to have people that are in place that are empowered and that have the resources that they need to be able to do their jobs. As a superintendent, it's being visible and letting those kids know, hey, great job, and I'm at your concert, and I'm coming to your playground, and I'm coming in for lunch, and just walking around and saying hello. I'm coming in reading to your class, and this is who I am, and I'm proud of you in that sense. And I do that now as a high school principal, going down to the elementary schools, because it makes them aware of who the high school principal makes them feel proud. I want to go to that high school at some day. So superintendent would go along with that as well, of just being visible. And it's actually easier talking to elementary kids than high school kids who don't know you. Like, elementary kids will come up and like say hello, and high school kids, if they don't know you, just walk right by you. And so that would be my role, is to make sure we have people in place that know how to do their jobs, and that I'm empowering them to do their jobs. And if they need resources, then we need to allocate them differently. That's the budget process that I help with as well. But then once again, you're dealing with your business manager who's really leading that. So it's really overseeing all those things and making sure that we have the right people in place.
So what do you feel are your greatest weaknesses coming into this possible position?
Well, the first two would obviously be, I have never been a superintendent before, and I have no referendum experience. So I think those are pretty obvious in that sense. I think just as with any job, until none of us had experience with our first job until we got a job, and so like that's true in all areas. And I think my track record has shown that when I've been given an opportunity to advance, that I've been able to do well in that sense. And I think like in this community especially, passing a referendum, let's talk about referendums, passing a referendum in different parts of the state is different than passing a referendum in Ozaukee County. And so it doesn't necessarily equate to success in one area, doesn't necessarily equate to success in Grafton. Every community is going to be different in that sense. So, but I do know that what I do a good job of is building relationships with people, that I am someone who's trustworthy. People do see me as being honest, and they also see me as being straightforward and being able to communicate the mission and vision of the district and the positive things that are going on, as well as the things that we have to work on. And so, although I don't have those areas of success yet because I haven't attempted them, I would hope my track record over time has shown that we're able to achieve success. So as I look at my time in Cedarburg High School, when we started there, we had a 24.4 ACT, Grafton had a 24.2, and Mequon had like a 25.7, I think. And so 7 years later, Cedarburg's at 25.5, Mequon's at like 25.6, and Grafton's at 24.2. And so we've made progress, and Grafton's still at 24.2, which sounds bad, except 24.2, when I count up, and there's like 510, you can go on DPI's site, there's like 510 high schools in the state, and 24.2 is 25th in the state if you take out like the charter, the small little science academy things that have like 10 kids or 50 kids or whatever, and you look at a high school of more than 100 students, so you're still in the top 5% of the state. And so, but my time as a principal has shown that I have the ability to build relationships with people, to build a culture of excellence, but at the same time improve ACT scores. And I think that would relate well to a weakness that I have of not being a superintendent ever. So I think those would be the things that I'd be focusing on, gaining those experiences, but at the same time, my past practice would show that I think I'd be able to tackle those.
If you're given the position as a superintendent, what is your view as far as AD and vice principal at the high school level? Should it be one job or should it be two jobs?
So, when you have 900 students in a high school, it seems hard for me to fathom the fact that two people are going to be able to do that job. If you're going to have a principal, and then you're going to have an AD, AP, and those are your only two administrators when you think of all the different things going on and all the pieces that go together with athletics, activities. If you're trying to create a culture of excellence with teachers, you're trying to be in classrooms, that's a very difficult task to spread out that thin. And so I think the thing to look at would be comparables. What are other districts doing? What does that look like? Do you need 3? I don't know. Do you need 2.5? I don't know. Can you get by with 2? You did 2 this year, and now you're rehiring again in that sense as Kevin has moved on to the middle school, and I'm sure will do a great job there. I've met him, and he seems like a really sharp guy. I'd have to look more into the data. What does that look like? What are we talking about? But as I look at other high schools and my experience with that, 2 is a very difficult thing to keep someone doing it long term because of unless the community is okay with administration not being at athletic events or not being at fine arts events, because there's so many different events that go on at a high school that deserve recognition. And when I go to a swimming meet, I have people come up and say, thanks for coming. If I go to a Friday night football game, everyone expects me to go to that. But it's just as important to go to the swimming meet or anything else you can think of as it is to go to something that people think is the sporting event, and it's a community event in that sense. So, I guess I can't give you a hard answer, but I think from what I know, it seems like that should be something that could be looked at. Does that mean you need 3? No. But I don't know what you need. But is that going to be able to be sustainable over time with only 2?
You did that on purpose, had to come up the steps again. Yes, of course.
Hi, John Meineke. I'm sure you've looked at the 2013-14 data from the state of Wisconsin and seen that Grafton per pupil is significantly higher than any of the North Shore communities in terms of costs for administration, costs for teaching, and things of that nature. What are your thoughts on controlling cost of administration, controlling cost of busing, controlling costs on some of these other activities that really have kind of been ignored for the last several years, and there have been other priorities? So that's one of, I guess, our biggest concerns is, when you start looking at the costs relative to these other communities, Grafton has really become quite out of line, and we need to have kind of a re-evaluation of where the administration fits into that, and how do you refocus the administration to a teaching function and making sure that people are interacting with students.
So I actually haven't seen the 2013-14 data, so I'll say that as a disclaimer right away. I will say, as I walk around today, it's really lean here. When I compare what we have at Cedarburg, when I compare what I know Mequon has, when I compare what I know Nicolet has, like when I compare, I don't know what Port has, so I can't talk about them, and I don't, that'd be probably about where I'd stop with as I look at in that area. But as I have discussions, so the fuel costs, the things like that, I mean, that'd be something that would be a discussion. In situations like this, really, it's sitting down with the people that are in charge of these things and having a discussion about what has been the process in the past, how have we set our priorities in the past with that. But from my initial thing of just talking to people and the support staff that's here and the number of people that you have working in various areas, like it's really run lean around here, like really lean. So I'm not sure how the data says that, in all honesty, because I know Mequon has more than Cedarburg does, and Cedarburg has more than Grafton does, and Nicolet has more than anyone. But like those would be the pieces. So I'd have to look at that data more closely with the business manager to say that. But those would be setting your priorities. Your budget should be set on your priorities. Right, and so what you prioritize. Unfortunately, you know, in my last 7 years, every year we've been cutting. And so that's just what's occurred. And so you're trying to make those cuts so it doesn't affect the classroom. You try and stay away from the classroom as much as possible. But that's where, once again, having a process that is transparent, this is how we set it, and this is what we need. If we expect this is what we need. And so if there's sacrifices along the way, and I'm sure there have been in this district to be where it is now with some of the cuts that have occurred, then that would be something that has to be looked at more. Tom's getting his steps in.
Yeah, I'm hustling though. I'm hustling.
In your years as a principal, how many different superintendents have you worked with? And what are your takeaways? What are your positive and negative takeaways of what you would bring into being a superintendent?
So in my 7 years in Cedarburg, I've had 3. And so I had someone who had been there a number of years, I don't know, 10, 12, 15 years. I had someone who was there for 2 years, and now we have a new superintendent this year. When I was in West Dallas, I had someone who'd been there 15, 20 years, and had been a product of that system. He'd only been in the West Dallas system his whole time. And so I've seen multiple different styles, and I think with every style I see things that have shown me I should think differently about change. I should think differently about interacting with people and different ways to say things. And I've also seen things that I'm like, oh, that didn't work so well. How would I have done it differently? If there's a theme that I've learned, is that you can never over communicate with people. And I've seen superintendents who do a really great job of that, and I've seen superintendents who struggle with that. And so it's both encouraged me to be a better communicator and reminded me of what happens when you don't communicate in that sense. And I've seen it, you know, with the superintendent who's only been there 2 years. It's harder to build trust in only 2 years. And the superintendent who now is in his first year, and he'd worked in our district for 2 years before, so it's in his 3rd year. But trust and building trust takes time, and so I think that's what I've learned through watching all of them, is definitely there isn't just one way to get change to occur or to build trust, and you have to be true to yourself. I've also learned that. Don't be someone else. Don't try and be someone else, but to learn from those styles and how would that relate for me. And it's been invaluable to have 4 different styles that I've seen in that sense.
From this side. Thank you.
So if you got this job after your first year, what would success look like to you?
So success would be based on what goals have we set for the year, and have we achieved those goals. So success should always be something that is based on a standard that we're seeking to achieve. And Sometimes those are data points. Sometimes those are the feeling you get in the room as well, and the relationships that you've built that may not be hard to put a number on or hard to categorize in that sense. So, but success for me has always been what goals have we set for the year, and have we achieved those goals? And if we haven't achieved those goals, it doesn't mean it's a failure, but why didn't we achieve those goals? So if we reflect, did we set the goal too high? Did I not do a good job? What am I going to do differently? And so as we work with teachers now with the educator effectiveness piece, and teachers set these student learning objectives, so SLOs. And at the end of the year, did they meet their objective or not? And it's great if they met their objective, but what I like even more is when I sit down and talk with them is like, okay, well, why did you meet it or why did you not meet it? Because the conversation is really what's important. Because you might have just got lucky. You might have set a low goal, and it was just really easy. It doesn't matter how good a teacher you were. The kids were going to meet it on their own. But what process did you follow? What are the steps you did? Did you have checkpoints? All those things. So that's how I would evaluate success, is what goals have we set? What progress have we made towards those goals? And to be honest with you, like, one of the goals will obviously be something along trust, but you have to make progress towards that. That's how I'd evaluate success.
Thank you for being so close.
I know, right? My name is Mary Lidke. I just have a quick question. Wondering if you can think about one of the more difficult situations you faced in your first couple years as a high school principal, and think about if you would do anything differently now in terms of how you've evolved as a person, as a professional. I guess I would just like to hear your reflection on that.
Yeah, so I would say, I'll give you an example. I remember when I first came to the high school, and so I was the third principal in 4 years. There had been a vote of no confidence a couple years before that on the superintendent. So there was the teachers said we're not writing recommendation letters. So there were some hurt feelings from teachers to administrators to parents to teachers, and it was like it was just weird. I remember coming in there and being like, this should be great. And then people just staring at me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I left West Allis. They liked me there and you hate me. But then I talked to them individually and they seemed to like me. But then as a group, they just like looked at me. And so early on, I probably used sarcasm way more than I should have. Because like I remember, for example, probably not the best statement to make, but I said like, you're like the Dementors. It was when Harry Potter was out. I'm like, you're like the Dementors. You're sucking the life out of me. And some people thought that was really funny, and other people didn't like that at all. And that was me growing and figuring out how to communicate what I was thinking without being offensive. And that probably wasn't a good thing to say out loud. It was probably a good thing to go home and say to my wife, or maybe say to the administrative team, but like really out loud, probably not the best thing. So I think that's one thing that I've grown over time, is that inner voice, sometimes like turning it off, and like not saying it out loud. And because I remember we'd taken a group. So when I first took that job, I met with department chairs individually and said, what's going great in your department? What are you working on? And how can I help you? If I could do one thing for you, what would it be? Well, the overarching theme was that they needed collaborative time. They didn't have any time to talk to each other. There was no time built in. So we took a group of teachers at Stevenson High School, which is like the birthplace of professional learning communities where you dialogue and can discuss lessons and so forth. And so we went on this thing, we brought it back. The teachers presented at a faculty meeting of what they learned. And then they finished, and then they like sat down, and it was weird. And so the next Monday was my department chair meeting, and I said to the department chairs, I said, like, I don't know if you realize this, but your teachers, they presented and you didn't clap for them. And I've never been anywhere where you don't clap for each other. Like, and I said, I present, and I do a great job, obviously, and you never clap for me, but I don't expect you to. See, I was using sarcasm again, right? See, so I'm still learning. And I'm like, and I said, but I've never been anywhere where you don't clap. And one of the teachers said, yeah, you're right. We used to clap. I don't know why we didn't clap. I said, yeah. I said, when a teacher, it's hard to get up in front of teachers, especially high school teachers. When you do that, no matter what level you are, you're getting in front of your peers who are maybe you're wondering, are they better than I am? I don't want to come across as I'm the know-it-all. So, but when they talk, you should like appreciate their work, and talking about that sort of allowed them to realize yeah, you're right. We do need to be doing that. And now that's, I mean, you know, even right away, they just became more aware of that themselves. But definitely that whole sarcasm piece, that inner voice working through that is something that I had to overcome. And I'm still overcoming.
This is a pretty basic question, but why do you want to be part of this community? My wife and I made a decision, took us about 6 months, with our son to take a family tradition of going to a private school for the last 50 years. Everybody in our family went there. And I met with Scott, the principal of Grafton, who blew me away and caused us to change that. And I saw an excitement in him that said I wanted to be part of that. But why do you want to be part of this community?
So I think there's just a ton of untapped potential in Grafton. I think that there are so many good things going on here that aren't being shared. Everyone that I talk to that has relationships with teachers in this district, with principals in this district, with district administrators, with school board, are saying positive things about this and about this community. I mean, you mentioned Scott, and obviously that's a draw for me as well. I worked with Scott for 4 years. He was an assistant principal for me. You know, he's a great leader. He's future superintendent material himself. So, you know, the opportunity to work with people like that is really what I'm looking for. You know, the search firm who was leading the Whitewater thing, they asked me, the search firm that was leading the Whitnell thing, they asked me, I wasn't interested in those positions. That wasn't what I was looking for. This is, I don't know if my ideas would work in certain communities. I do know it works really well in Ozaukee County. There's a different type of person that lives in these communities, and there's different expectations. And I say that teachers as we hire them. Like, no matter where I've been, I've always said, I wish I had more parent involvement. Well, welcome, because you're going to get it. So you better be ready. And as long as you have an answer as to why you're doing it, you will have the best fans you've ever had. But if you just say, well, that's because I've always done it that way, you will not last here. And that's the kind of community I want to be a part of. It's a community that wants to do their best and doesn't measure it against other things. Just we want to do our best. What does that look like? Let's define what that looks like. And I just think it's a great opportunity. It's a smaller district, which makes it also very attractive in that sense. You know, I told you I worked in a two high school town. I have no desire to ever be a superintendent in something like that. This is a great district size. You can offer such a wide range of activities across the district, and be able to challenge students in whatever their interests may be. Because we talk a lot about college and career readiness, and sometimes we forget about that career piece, but Grafton is able to do that. You're able to focus on that career, but at the same time, expectations should be really high, because careers right now are not getting easier to get in if you want to make more than minimum wage. And so it's having those high expectations, and I think Grafton, with their development, with the forward lean they have in that area, like I just think there's I think there's a lot of potential that hasn't been reached here, and that was reinforced today when I walked around and talked to people. They're looking for someone to come in and build bridges. They're looking for someone to come in and bring processes and empower them to do their jobs. You've hired great people, and now can we keep those people long enough to see change occur? You have to keep. I'm not someone who went to a high school and I tried some ideas, and then I'm like a freshman coming out of college in the NBA draft. You're hiring me on potential. Well, I've been somewhere long enough that I've actually tried ideas and they've worked well, and I still have really good relationships with parents. I haven't alienated people. People aren't happy that I'm looking to leave. They're wishing I wasn't leaving because they want me to stay. So, and that's what I'm looking to have here as well, from a job for my family.
Jeff, do you have a concluding remark? That sounded sort of like a concluding remark right there, but...
Yes. Do I have time?
And then after the concluding remark, you have the sheets and you can write anything you want on them. We will read them all. We've read all the ones through the interviews and things, and so we'll give you 15 minutes before the board will then move, and he'll go through another hour interview. So I really want to thank you for your questions. There were some great questions here. I wish you would have written them up for our interview team. So fantastic. And Jeff, concluding remarks.
Yeah, I had some things written down. Ironically, the first one is Grafton is a great opportunity and one of the top districts in the state. That was literally like that's what I view as the reason why I'm standing here, the reason why I applied for this position, the reason why I'm willing to leave a really good job where people like what I'm doing and to come into a place that maybe right now wouldn't be as settling, and I'm going to have to work harder than I've had to work, because the bridges bridges need to be built. And the only way to do that is by being out in the community, by meeting with people, by having those conversations, and really sharing the good news of what's happening in this district. So I guess those are the things that really attract me to it. Obviously, the quality of teaching is something that is attracted to me as well. This isn't something that's broken and can't be fixed, and this is going to be a disaster that I'm not going to want as a superintendent. This is something that has great potential that would lean towards that. So, I wrote down here, one of my strengths is building relationships, and I think that's something that the district is looking for. It's something I would work very hard at doing, being transparent, openly sharing what we're doing, the direction we're going in, getting people to buy into that vision and mission, and to sort of work towards a common goal, which I think when you get people focused on a common goal, then great things happen. And I think that's something I'm very attracted to at this job. So I also appreciate you coming out tonight, getting an opportunity. I look forward to meeting hopefully all of you individually if I get this job. But if not, then we will see each other down the road at some point. So have a great night and have a happy 4th of July, everyone. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you. Was that applause for me? No, it was for you. No. Hey, here we go. Okay, take some time to fill that out. Diana will help collect them. If I can get one more person to help on that, Leslie. Okay, and take your time and write and respond to it. And thank you so much for taking the time to come. Appreciate it.